Hello, welcome to Ildefonso Inc. Today, I am your host, Spencer Alfonso. I'm the creative director and co-owner, and I have a friend here with me, Dan Bailey, and we are going to be talking about the rare Dayton 1968 holiday model Rogers kit. Dan is a music director, drummer for Father John Misty, and recording engineer. And Ildefonso Inc., we are a full-service sync house and music agency, and on this show, we invite musicians to hang out at our studio and bring over their favorite or most unique pieces of gear. So, let's dive into this kit. Dan, first off, why don't you tell us how long you've had this kit for?
I've had this guy about a year, 18 months now. This is kind of new to me. Yeah, I was on the lookout for this specific size configuration in good condition for a while. I've had a bunch of Rogers over the years. But I got these at, where are we? We're on, it would have been Pittsburgh. I got these at my friend's, Chris Hawthorne's drum shop in Pittsburgh. Happened to be playing a venue like down the block. Always stop in to say what's up. And then I had in my head, if I ever see the Rogers pewter sparkle in 12, 13, 16 with the 20, like I've got to jump on it. And then of course I walk in and he has this one from 68 that's just kind of factory condition, you know?
Yeah, it looks incredible. Yeah, it's a beautiful kit. So, you've had it for about a year and a half. What is a holiday kit? What does that mean?
I believe that's I don't honestly know a ton about the Rogers internal classifications. I know that's like one of their size configurations. There was also a tower kit. There was also like a Hollywood kit. There were that were like the drums all being the same. It was just they came in different configurations for like different purposes and stuff. But I believe the Holiday was like their kind of down the middle kind of drum kit of the time, you know?
Yeah. So what drew you to this year? Like you said, you wanted this size. Is the size thing for the sound in the studio that you're going for, or like? And then what? How do you know that this was the one?
I mean, he had a couple other kits in stock too, but I walked in and he had this one set up and played it, and it was kind of just immediately had like a vibe to it. A lot of the heads were original, so it just had kind of its original character to it, and it was really fun. And yeah, I've always really loved this finish, and I really like their 60s drums. There was nothing particular about the Dayton era that I was going for, but definitely wanted one of their 60s kits with this shell that they had, the old 5-ply shell. But yeah, seeing one in this kind of condition was kind of the sign, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so then, as far as your relationship with Rogers, like, what are some artists and or records and or kits specifically that have kind of drew you to the brand and the legacy?
You know, I really just kind of liked the drums themselves. In the 60s and 70s, they were kind of the... Ludwig was bigger, Gretsch was bigger, Slingerland was bigger. So it was... You would see, like, there's a lot of great footage of, like, I believe Al Jackson Jr., Stax Records playing them, like, live on tour, but then they were just using whatever house kit they had at the time, and venues would have drum kits and stuff. More, it was just where they kind of sit inside the total, like, sound profile of the other drums of the era. Slingerland and Ludwig tend to be really, like, kind of tubby and dense and really, like, dark. And I tend to like kind of a tackier, brighter kind of sound, and Rogers have the sharper edge, and a couple things about their construction that just make them kind of more present and brighter and project a little more. So really it wasn't that I didn't grow up with anybody particular playing these drums. It's just hearing them in context of the dozens of other drums from that era I've heard. They always just kind of rose to the top, you know?
Totally. Yeah. So now that you've had it for a year, like, what kind of songs do you find yourself pulling this kit out for specifically?
This is, they are, of vintage drums, they're about as versatile as they come because they kind of have more attack and brightness, which old drums tend to be pretty thuddy, you know. But obviously anything that's going for any kind of historical perspective on a drum sound, or anything that I'm going to tune like really high, or just where I want a lot of like tonality and like, just I want the drums to open up and kind of speak. Like, I'm not going to use these when I'm doing super dead stuff. I kind of want more. I want the resonance is what I want, like the tonalities of the toms especially.
Yeah. So what do you currently have on the toms, and then maybe kind of walk us through how you've tuned them today, and then why you kind of went for that sound in general.
Sure. I've got all the drums have coated ambassadors, Remo coated ambassadors on top. I believe these have clears. Yeah, I haven't changed them yet. So clear ambassadors on bottoms. I usually put coated on both sides just because that's what they had back in the day, so it feels most accurate. But I find that coated ambassadors are it's like putting 9-gauge strings on a guitar. It's like if you buy a Strat, maybe even if you play 11s, you kind of have to feel it with 9s to know what it does before you change the setup and stuff. I've always thought coated ambassadors give you the best picture of what the drum actually does. And so if I'm trying to highlight the things that make drums different from one another, these are the heads I always put on every drum kit because it sounds like you're hearing the drum and not the head. Whereas a lot of heads have pre-muffled stuff or Aquarians are kind of under tension already. These just have the way they sit on a drum, especially old drums, under tension, they just kind of form to the shell really well. And then you just get the clearest picture of what the drum actually sounds like. And then today I have them tuned kind of medium high because that's just where drums of that era kind of were, where they have a very obvious pitch and maybe a 1 second, decay. But yeah, it's just picking heads that kind of highlight what the drums do best. And I feel like coated ambassadors are the way to go on these.
Sweet. Yeah. So maybe play the kit a little, just kind of give us a feel for what that sounds like. Yeah, it's really nice and warm, but like you said, it has that.
Yeah, and there's a nice boing to it. There's personality. A modern approach to drums is so kind of thud based,
Totally.
Which is great too, and a sound you have to be good at getting. But there's something about, especially if you were only recording these mics or these drums with a couple mics 10 feet from them or something. There's just a musicality. They feel like an instrument the way a piano feels like an instrument, when drums are set up this way and allowed to speak and all that.
Yeah, it's almost like they bounce, they have a I don't know, there's a swiftness to the way they sound that's really nice. So prior to this kit, if you had to get this sound, what were you using in the studio? And then if someone was like, oh, I need that sound, but I can't find that exact kit, what are other kind of references for people who want to try to go after this classic Rogers sound in a modern?
My favorite vintage kit before these was that I had and I still have them over 10 or 15 years, is a Camco Oaklawn, which is an even more obscure, they were the fifth place brand or whatever at the time, and they went defunct a long time ago, but those drums have a similar, they're a little more Ludwig-y than these, but they're a little brighter than Ludwig's. These are kind of like a steroided version of those. These have a little more horsepower and kind of projection. But I would use those, or I've had several other, I had a Red Sparkle mid-60s Rogers for a long time that I moved on to get, because these were the sizes I actually wanted in the finish I wanted. Didn't need redundant drums. But yeah, always kind of having, I've had a Rogers kind of at all times since probably the mid 2000s. I've been one of those people that always has 15 or 20 drum kits at any given time. But and then if you're looking for this, luckily, another thing I like about Rogers is that as far as this era drums go, they're still the best bargain. In a world where a player kind of beat up condition Ludwig is $2,000, you can find really clean Rogers in the 13 to 15 range. I believe that's kind of the area I paid for these, and just because they don't have the cultural capital of Ludwig in the 60s or Slingerland in the big band era, you can find these way cheaper, and they tend to be built really, really well. The thing about the mid 60s, especially with the Beatles explosion, is that he was playing Ludwig, everybody wanted to play Ludwig. So those drums, especially from 64, 65, 66, are famously really hit and miss. There are great kits, and then there are total dogs, because they were literally printing drums as fast as they could get them out of the factory, because they had the hottest artist anyone's ever had, and that was such a touchstone where everybody wanted to start playing drums. And in that world where a shop would have one drum make most times, the same way somebody was a Gibson shop or a Fender shop, it was the same, the drum shop I grew up going to here in Riverside was a Ludwig shop. So they only had Ludwig stuff in the 80s. And so Rogers didn't have the market share, but that also meant that they could build better drums. Like the quality control, I've never played one that's like a total dog, that hadn't sat in moisture, had something that wasn't its fault, you know? As you can see on these, the chrome is like immaculate. Like Ludwig chrome from the 60s is not this clean because they just used a cheaper process. They didn't care about their hardware the same way. All the hardware still works perfectly, doesn't slip. They were just building, Gretsch and Camco and Rogers were just building better drums than Ludwig and Slingerland, just objectively at the time, just for build quality. So I really still think they're like the sweet spot in, you want that vibe, you want something that's going to work, it's not going to break on you. You know, they're kind of, all the hardware feels really kind of purpose built and strong, and they're just really excellent made instruments, which is why you see so many in such good condition still. You know? Totally.
As far as what you pair with this kit, like today, what did you pair with it?
Snare drum wise, we've got, we also, I believe, are going to talk about my favorite snare drum. So I brought this is a 1959 Ludwig Super 400, which is like the precursor to the Superphonic that I've had forever and ever, which is probably my most used snare drum. But it feels like if we're going with that era, this is a great, complements the drums really well. And then just good old faithful 22-inch Istanbul Agop crash ride and some 30th anniversary hi-hats. And my favorite cymbal company by a mile, just only having, the only things I've been playing for the last 15 or 20 years now. So
rad. Okay, sick. And then as far as in your studio, what are you finding yourself being drawn to with microphones, like when you're recording this kit? Is there any specific kind of thing that you're usually going to throw up first?
Yeah, I mean, because if I'm going for this type of, if I'm working on a track where this is going to be the right call, that usually means there's some kind of historical approach to the recording, meaning that I'm going to try to use old dynamic mics, specifically like I love Beyer M201s from the 60s and 70s. I've got a pair of AKG D190s that are incredible. Cole's 4038 ribbons for overheads just have that thing with these drums, especially when you have kind of more tonal toms. Having that kind of like ribbon option really brings out the mids of the toms and highlights those. But yeah, just mostly a lot of dynamic mics and ribbon mics tend to be the kind of the way to capture what these do best.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for breaking that down. I know you have a Patreon where you break down stuff. How do people find you if they want to follow along more?
Yeah, probably mainly through my Instagram, which is, D. Richard Bailey, and then, links to there through, I believe it's Patreon / D. Richard Bailey. But yeah, we talk about kind of my day-to-day workflow of like playing on tracks remotely for people, or like prepping for gigs or booking gigs, or basically everything that has to do with being like a studio engineer or a session player. Kind of it's all open it's all open book, kind of answering questions as we go. And yeah, it's been super fun to interact with people on that.
Sweet. Well, thank you again. This has been Mothership Gear. Thank you guys for watching. Check out Ildefonso Inc. At ildefonso.co and on Instagram and Twitter at Ildefonso Inc. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.